Project number 1 is this sea glass beaded garland that I saw at Pottery Barn. I fell in love with it, but it is no longer available. No problem, we can make that. These clear plastic ornaments are from Amazon, and I had to buy them in a pack, but they worked out to about $1 a piece. I'm removing the hanger part of the ornament and just discarding it. We're not going to use it for this project. This plastic turned out to be thicker and tougher than I thought it was going to be, so I ended up having to use a drill to drill a hole in the bottom. The drill bit I used was fairly large because the rope I was using had to be able to fit through it. You really can't see the hole that I drilled in it here, but you will once they're painted. I used sea glass spray paint, and these were the colors I was able to find it in. The two I ended up choosing to use were the clear and the aqua. On most of the ornaments, I sprayed the outside, and then on some of them, I did just a little paint splatter of white to give it some personality. I didn't record it because I'm a chicken about getting paint on my camera lens, but you've seen people spray paint before. I chose about 3 of the ornaments to spray on the inside. I just put the nozzle right up to the big hole there, and I sprayed directly inside of it, and it gave this really neat kind of marbly look. I used a coat of the clear frosted spray on the outside to take the shine off the outside. This nautical rope is from Dollar Tree. When you unravel it, you end up with 3 strands. I'm using 1 strand at a time to string my sea glass ornament balls. Here you can see the holes that I had to drill in the bottom much better. If you can find flimsier plastic ornaments, you could probably just poke a pen right through the bottom. That was my original plan. Unfortunately, at the time that I ordered these, it was still taking 2 to 3 weeks about for Amazon to deliver, so I didn't really have time to experiment. When you put your rope through, you want to make sure that you start with the small hole on the bottom because you're going to need the bigger hole so that you can feed it through and pull the rope out. You could always wrap a piece of tape around the end of the rope to make it even easier to feed through. If you enjoy coastal home decor like I do, please hit the subscribe button and the little notification bell so that you don't miss any of my upcoming coastal home decor videos. Tying 1 knot at the end with the small hole is plenty, but the other side of the ornament with the bigger hole needed at least 3 knots. Once you get to the end of the first rope, you'll need to hot glue a second strand onto the first one, and then use clear tape, preferably, to wrap around and seal where you've joined the 2 strands. You'll continue adding ornament balls until your strand is as long as you want it, and cut off the excess rope. For project number 2, we're going to start with this willow wreath from Dollar Tree. We're going to take it apart, and this is pretty easy. The willow's pretty flexible. You're just going to look all around the wreath for an end piece and then start pushing that through. I had to actually break that off because it was already coming off, but on most of the willow wreaths, you won't have to do that. Most likely you'll only see one end piece at a time, but as you unravel it, the next one will show. Even though the willow is flexible, I don't want it to break, so when I unravel it, I'm letting it keep its shape and I'm just bending it as little as possible and just more winding it off of the wreath. Once we get to the end here, you'll notice that even though we've taken the willow off of the wreath, it's still holding that round shape. We don't want that for our project, so we're going to need to bend it to our will, and to do that, we don't need anything special. All we need is water. The easiest way to do this is to throw it in your bathtub or your sink in hot water overnight. This is going to relax the willow and make it pliable so that we can shape it the way that we want. This project is so easy as long as you remember to let the water do the work. This cylinder vase from Dollar Tree is going to be the base of our lantern. We'll be using rubber bands to train our wicker and hold our design in place, so you'll need a bag that has various sizes. I want my design angled, so I'm going to take my first piece of wicker and I'm going to use a rubber band to hold this in a diagonal. Choose a rubber band size that will fit over the edge of the glass, but still provide enough tension to hold the piece of wicker in place. Use a second rubber band to also hold it in place at the top of the vase. The excess will get in the way, so cut it off using a pair of shears, or scissors would probably even work. I got these at Dollar Tree in the gardening section and I love them. I use them for everything. They were $1 and well worth it. There are two kinds of wicker in these wreaths. There are flatter pieces and then there are more rounded pieces. For my first lantern, I started out using the flatter pieces on the bottom. I just felt like that would be easier just while I was getting the hang of it, and I think that it was. It's not that big a difference, but it probably did save me some frustration to use the flat pieces on the first layer for my first time around. Now you can reinsert your first piece and you're just going to follow that angle all the way around the vase for your first layer. I just eyeballed the spacing. If you want a tighter pattern, just use more of the wicker pieces. When you're ready to move on to your second layer, you're going to angle your pieces opposite of the first layer, and you're going to crisscross them at the bottom and at the top. For this layer, you're going to use a separate set of rubber bands, again, one at the top and one at the bottom. Tuck your entire top row of wicker pieces under this second set of rubber bands. Add 3 more rubber bands to the center to keep everything flat and secure. cut the extra off your wicker pieces, making sure it's flush with the bottom first, and then you can cut the excess off the top. To finish off the lantern and hold everything together, we're going to use another piece of wicker and we're going to wrap it around the top and the bottom. We need our trusty rubber bands to hold this in place again, but this time we're going to go the length of the vase. You'll see the wicker buckling right here too. This is because I didn't keep the piece wet enough. I was busy making the video instead of paying attention. You can keep a little bucket of water next to you to keep your pieces in while you work so they don't dry out. Make an X with your rubber bands so that you can hold both sides of the wicker in place. Scoop both of your rubber bands toward the ends of your wicker piece to keep it in place. To train the wicker to mold to the vase, we're going to add one more rubber band, and it's going to go around the middle of that piece so that it holds it nice and flat. Repeat the exact same process of adding a piece of wicker around the bottom of the vase. If your wicker is starting to dry out at this point, I recommend putting it back into hot water for a couple of hours, then taking it out and letting it dry before you go on to the last step. It will only reform its shape if it's wet. Either way, you need to let it dry completely before you add the hot glue that's going to hold this all together. Once it has dried completely, you can gently lift up the edges on the top and the bottom and secure them with your hot glue. It probably makes more sense to watch it than to hear me explain it, but just to be clear, the only thing you're hot gluing is that third layer. The layers that are going around the top and the bottom. Give the glue a few minutes to set up before you start taking off the rubber bands. Most of them you can't just slide off because they're stuck under the wicker now, so it's easiest to just cut them. I'm adding a little bit of this nautical rope to the top of my lantern to help it just look a little more finished at the top. I'm going to add a handle to my lantern by using this wired jute rope that is also from Dollar Tree. As you can see, it has wire inside of it and it holds its shape. I'm just wrapping up the ends into a little circle so that I have some substance I can add my hot glue to. This is getting hot glued directly to the inside of the glass. And that's all there is to making your own DIY wicker lantern. I made a second lantern and I used all round pieces for that one. I thrifted the vase at Goodwill for $1.59. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please hit subscribe and click the little notification bell so that you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. Thank you so much for joining me here on Lazy DIY. See you next week.